there is a danger that if politicians take the view, look, all we have to do is educate the public on how good
It's
immigration is,
patronising.
it's not
Yeah.
going to go
No.
down, not going to go down well. So I think Keir Starmer's aware of the pitfalls. He's characterised as a sort of liberal metropolitan. So he very much wants to, avoid lecturing the country on that.
Let's start with something I know you've been writing about this week, not least in your interview with London Mayor Sadiq Khan, which is Labour's stance on immigration. And we'll put the link to read the article in the show notes. So this is a question from YouTube user Emily Finch, and she asks, will Keir Starmer and the Labour government attempt to change the conversation around immigration or continue with a more hawkish stance in an attempt to win over reform voters? She says, is it possible that the riots have proved to the government how dangerous anti-immigration language can be and the need to discuss the benefits of immigration in order to avoid the vitriolic anger seen in recent weeks?
Very good question. So I think two things define Keir Starmer's approach on immigration. First, he doesn't want this to become or remain a culture war with very emotive, sort of charged, polarizing language, and he wants to engage with sort of compassion and fairness. But he also wants a system that voters see as managed and as working. I think that particularly means Labour wants a grip on illegal migration. They want to obviously control asylum. Keir Starmer said repeatedly, it's become almost a cliche now, he wants to smash the gangs. He knows he's going to be held to account on that. I think the hope in Labour is that dealing with some of those issues, particularly grievances around asylum seekers in hotels, might free up the space for a more mature conversation around other forms of migration and where there are gaps in the economy. Where can you train up more local workers and where do you actually rely on migrant labour?
And in terms of the number, that net migration figure, is Labour committed to reducing that? 636,000,
Yes.
I think.
So Keir Starmer said he wants lower immigration. On net migration, they're in the happy position where it's projected to fall quite significantly, possibly by hundreds of thousands, because the spike you got was a product of quite an array of factors. Partly it was liberalisation of visas for the rest of the world. Boris Johnson did that. Some describe him as the most pro-immigration prime minister in history. It was refugees from Ukraine, Hong Kong, Afghanistan. It was some people returning to the UK after COVID. Some of these factors are going to drop out of the numbers in the years ahead. So Labour may be able to tell a story of reducing immigration without actually having to do very much. But look, I think it's true to say that in many ways they'll get a tougher time on immigration than the Conservatives did, because the narrative is that past Labour governments did lose control of immigration. Obviously, Brexit was heavily linked to free movement from Eastern Europe. That stimulated the rise of UKIP and Nigel Farage. So this is going to be a sort of defining political issue for Labour. In my interview with Sadiq Khan, as you say, he calls for politicians to be braver and bolder in combating misinformation and disinformation over immigration, says that people shouldn't accept the premise that somehow all our problems are caused by immigration and boats from Calais, and says, look, when people say, can we please talk about immigration, it's nonsense, because we've been talking about it for decades.
We have, but I think that's a bit, maybe disingenuous isn't the right word, but it has been the case, hasn't it? Maybe not in the last couple of years, but if anyone voiced the view that perhaps immigration was too high, that they would somehow be branded a racist or a bigot. And I think to write that off, that we've talked about it for the last 20 years, is a bit naughty, really.
Yeah, look, I think he says we need a different kind of conversation around immigration. I pressed him. I said, look, do you disagree with Keir Starmer's aim on reducing immigration? He actually said, look, he recognises you do need to train up more local workers, and also said that high levels of migration can cause pressure on public services if you don't have the public services there. And he said the last government failed on that because of austerity. This government won't. So I think that's also the test for Labour, is can they get public services back to a level where people do feel perhaps more comfortable with higher levels of migration, because the reality people say is with an aging population and with jobs that natives just don't want to do, the UK is going to have to remain a relatively high migration nation from that perspective.
I actually saw parallels with part of what he said to you in your interview with the Brexit debate in some ways, because one of the points he made about immigration was that we need to be much better, or the Labour government needs to be much better at making the positive case for it. And that's something during the referendum campaign that the Remain side just failed to do. They
Yeah.
failed to make a positive case for staying, and it was all don't leave
Yeah.
because it's negative kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that's quite interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I think I at the time, and I think I still take this view, that was the best strategy available to them. I think you were never going to suddenly turn a pretty Eurosceptic country into sort of Europhile Cleggite. And I think there is a danger that if politicians take the view, look, all we have to do is educate the public on how good
It's
immigration is,
patronising.
it's not
Yeah.
going to go
No.
down, not going to go down well. So I think Keir Starmer's aware of the pitfalls. He's characterized as sort of liberal metropolitan. So he very much wants to, avoid lecturing the country on that. But clearly there is room, however, to rebut some of the myths that are spread around immigration. But above all, I think Labour just has to show grip and delivery, having the migrants the UK needs in the right sectors, and also a system that's clearly managed. Because for all the Conservatives' rhetorics about being tough on migration, the system's been in absolute chaos.